Sorry.
I'll jump in here.
Laura, what about you?
Well, everyone's spoken so beautifully about what they've known and the story itself. So I'll just add to it that the piece that interested me, which is probably the piece I knew in terms of Ray Kroc or McDonald's, was this question of the introduction of the filler. And I was fascinated that the film, pointed it out, but also this question of how did it turn from real food to, how we can make a fast buck and potentially poison people with that. And what is that? And the subversive question, which interested me the most, which is this question of, can capitalism hold compassion? And what is that story? And so that moved me so much when John first spoke to me about it, and hearing all these amazing people were involved. And I just would love to add, because I thought it was so incredible. I got to see the film last night with my daughter, who's just turning 12, and to hear from her perspective, because I like to think it's politically subversive and a commentary on this question of, empathy versus corporations, and can there be a place for both? And I was talking about my favorite shot, which just brings me to tears, of these two gentlemen with their arms around each other watching the McDonald's section of their sign be removed. And I was talking about it, and when we got in the car, my daughter said, "Mom, when those brothers were holding each other at the end?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "That's how I felt after the farewell address."
Oh.
She's like, "'Cause we just don't know what's next."
Yeah.
And that was the film to me. And I just loved that for a 12-year-old, the details of the story, the point was she got, I think, what you all intended. And I was really moved by that. So thank you for letting me be a mere part of it, because that is beautiful. Congratulations to asking that larger question right now.
You're not kidding. I mean, we're hearing everybody speak. I mean, we haven't been fortunate enough to have really eloquent people, but these guys to my left you would think, I guess, that questions or a conversation like this wouldn't come up, if you thought about this movie on its face. I get asked, I was doing some press with some, foreign journalists this morning on the phone, and yesterday and probably today, these kind of things come up. I mean, because it is all layered in there, all this stuff, I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment. We just show up and, we're the scouts who go out, and we just show up and go, okay, what do you want us to do? And we go do it. But they wrote it, and he directed it, and these guys found it and put it together. It's a good job, I think.
I mean, Ray is a very complicated character, but there are some things to admire about him, and I'm curious how you all sort of felt about Ray Kroc, and if those feelings changed while making the movie.
I knew Ray Kroc kind of the way that Michael was talking about as a person. I knew that he had, been I thought of him as the founder, even though I knew that there were the brothers before him. And I also knew that he had owned, the Padres. He had created the San Diego Padres. That was the extent. And I also knew that after his death, particularly, his wife gave away massive amounts of money, and I would hear her name on National Public Radio all the time. So that was my, personal relationship with it. But, knowing the story a little bit and seeing the things that are absolutely bedrock, admirable American traits of entrepreneurship, of persistence, of salesmanship, of a sense of seeing something for how far it can go, of vision. All of those things are incredibly attractive. And what I love about the way the movie unfolds, and it was particularly fun to watch it last night, was how there's a moment when he could tell the truth about the origin of the company, and you might not feel so badly about what happens if he could just give somebody else credit. If he could just be humble enough to go, there were these two brothers who had this amazing idea, and I figured out a way how to make it on every street in America with this other guy's help. And he could have said any of those things. But at the moment every moment that he has an opportunity to tell the truth, he can't do it because he needs to be the guy. And I also love there's a moment in the story where, and it's beautifully directed and beautifully written and beautifully acted, where you watch him kind of digest the lie over time, and it becomes the truth to him. And that is very indicative of where we are right now, which is what we're told is, in some ways, to many of us, more important than the actual truth. And we just want to believe the easy part of what's said, and not the hard parts. And I include myself in that. I don't want to have to deal with the hard parts. I don't want to have to deal with the fact that people are destroyed, or land is destroyed. I really, really like Egg McMuffins, and that's where my dilemma is.
It should be reminded too that when Ray met the brothers, he was in his 50s, and at that time in the 50s, this is a milkshake machine salesman who went in and saw the future, and he had already reached a point in his life, and reached a set in his life. To be able to break out of that just kind of shows the sheer ambition and determination, and I guess it's, as he says in the movie, persistence that he had just in him. And I think most Americans have that. I think that's something that we've always heard about and have been taught in a lot of ways to achieve the American dream. And I think if you look at Ray, if there's an admirable quality, I mean, if anything, the man was, my God, he was persistent and determined to get to a better place.
And and quite obviously a very, very, very hard worker, which you have to admire and we love. And you have to remember, coming off of World War II, America was in a place where we kicked ass, we won the war, we want it, we deserve it, and we want it now. And I think everybody was thinking, now is my time, because the country was. We were thriving, and it was like Ray in his 50s at that point said, when do I get to ring the bell? And I think he's driven, and that's something I relate to. I get that. And then when Michael's in the lot and he's put his entire financial resources on the line without telling Ethel, but and says one time, just be right one time. I mean, I relate to that guy heavily, and and it's there for that reason as well. So it's so that you can be somewhat conflicted. I mean, I think Don pointed out something really interesting, which is kind of always intended it, because I thought there were a couple different movies that would be really boring, and one was if it were a true Horatio Alger, Ray Kroc succeeds and we all leave the theater clapping movie. The other would be a corporate takedown of McDonald's and Ray Kroc back. Those are both really, really boring movies. The one that's more interesting is and I'm using this what Don said, is that it's a little more of a Rorschach test for the viewer in terms of what you bring to this experience.